Our next speaker is the CEO of the Austin Technology Council and is a professional keynote speaker who is focused on helping organizations build community. He's the author of 4 books and is the host of several popular podcasts. Please help me welcome Thom Singer.
We all know that the world has changed drastically in the last few years, and it's going to continue to change more as we move forward. We are in an era of very fast acceleration, and you cannot sit still. The pandemic, the fears of recession, remote work, and the entire move to virtual that has happened has really caused a lot of changes to the association world. In fact, many people predicted that the demise of associations was coming like a train through a tunnel right towards all of us who run membership organizations. Now, I actually believe the opposite is true. I think now is a pivotal time in history for membership and trade associations because people are craving connection. It was about 15 years ago that social media found its way into our lives. We started getting Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of these, and LinkedIn, and all of these tools that we received, we were told were going to change the way people network and connect and find new business. But when I speak to audiences, I ask people, how many of you just have so much business coming at you because you have a LinkedIn profile? Or when you tweet, how many just online sales happen for your company? Now, the truth is, there are some people who raise their hand when I say that because there are outliers out there who have capitalized on how to use social media to market their business. But for the most of us, for the average person, these are wonderful tools, but they haven't really shifted the game and they haven't replaced the need for human connection. My name is Thom Singer, and I have been speaking to audiences for over 12 years about the power of human relationships in business and how to create a stronger inner circle that's going to help you have more success and help your companies thrive. Because anytime we bring people together, that's when the magic can happen. I talk about community, collaboration, and conversations as the way to solve all problems. So if you're part of an association, that's really your role. We exist to help build community in the industries that we serve. That's one of the main reasons that people join. And if they come together and form community, then the opportunity to collaborate can really happen. And when people will sit down and talk about those hard things, those topics that sometimes we shy away from, when people will have those hard conversations, we can fix every problem in our association, in our industry, and I want to argue in our world. Imagine for a minute if our Congress in the United States actually thrived on being a community that collaborated and that had conversations. That would change everything that's coming out of Washington, D.C. And the same thing is true in your association and the companies who belong to your group. So what do? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to embrace this point that there is more loneliness and disconnectedness in the world now than there ever has been. In fact, a few years ago, Dr. Vivek Murthy, the current Surgeon General of the United States, and in fact, if you're a fan of Dr. Murthy, you know that he was actually Surgeon General once before. He was Barack Obama's Surgeon General. And 14 years ago or so, when he took that job, he decided that he would go out and research all of the problems that were facing the health of Americans, the obesity crisis, the opioid crisis, all of the different things that were bubbling up and creating problems for our healthcare system. And what he discovered that underlying all of these things was an epidemic of loneliness. And he wrote about this a few years ago in the Harvard Business Review. And that article was so popular, he was approached to turn it into a book that's called Togetherness. Now, if you think about this, an epidemic of loneliness, what do you mean? Well, if you go back just 5 or 10 years, the countries of Great Britain and Canada actually installed a minister of loneliness into their government to study these problems. So this isn't just an American problem. This is a worldwide problem. People are feeling more disconnected. But wait a minute, Thom, didn't we get Twitter? Didn't we get Facebook? Didn't we get LinkedIn and Instagram? Didn't all these things appear 15 years ago that were supposed to bring us closer together? Yeah, but most of the people who I speak to and the people who I interview really say that they don't have more friends than they used to. They don't have stronger business connections than they had before these tools were introduced. So this epidemic of loneliness is causing huge problems for everybody. There was also a recent study that there is a decline in friendships. These are things that academics have been studying for decades. And over the last 10 to 20 years, the amount of friendships that Americans claim to have gone down. Professor Scott Galloway from NYU recently made this survey part of his chart of the week that he puts out with some interesting factoid. And he showed that 15% of men and 10% of women claim that they don't have any close friends. And in fact, for many people, if you go back a few years, they would say that their human connections, their interactions with other carbon-based life forms took place at work. They would go to work and they would have that person in the next cubicle. They would have the conversation over at the water cooler. And what would coworkers do at lunchtime? They would get together, 4 people would cram into a car, they'd drive to a sandwich shop, and they'd laugh and they'd talk and they'd have that 45 minutes together where they could have some sort of an interaction with somebody. Maybe not their best friend, maybe not the people they were spending the holidays with, but every day they had a fresh engagement with some people who they came to know, and I would argue came to care about in certain situations. And then March 13th, 2020 came along, and we were all told that we needed to social distance for 2 weeks. God, that was the longest 2 weeks that I can ever remember. That 2 weeks seemed to have lasted for over 2 years for many people. So you take an epidemic of loneliness that already existed more than a decade ago, and you combine this with sending everybody home for over a year, almost 2 years, and still going on at 3 years for some people. And now you've taken away that lifeline to people. Humans, we're social creatures. We need each other. Now, you don't have to be an introvert or an extrovert to still need to have a connection to somebody. You need to know that people care. And yet, remote work has bubbled up as the replacement for taking that commute and going on. So this problem of people feeling disconnected, it's not going to go away anytime soon. In fact, this is where I believe that trade associations and industry groups, this is what they owe the people who work in their fields. This is where we need to step up. And I run an industry group. This is where we need to step up and start offering ways for people to connect. But people don't just need a happy hour with an open bar. People don't just need a newsletter coming from the association president. People need to really feel engaged, and they want that sense of belonging. Disconnectedness is real, and it's happening in your industry. And the cure for that is a way to show belonging. But here's the thing. So often we get so caught up in the work that we're doing, we forget to just see the people who are around us. So even when people come to your monthly meetings or your annual conference, oftentimes they're listening to the speaker, then they're hanging out with their closest friend who they traveled across the country to be there with. And on every break, they're on their phone, checking LinkedIn, checking Facebook, calling into the office. They're not actually taking that time to really get that human connection that live events really are all about. So this is what I do. I call myself the conference catalyst. When I speak at your event, I talk to people about how to maximize being at your event and then how to take these skills back to their office and back to their communities. And as people who run associations, it's our job to set the tone for human connections and to bring value to our members. And that's why we need to think about how do we get back to the basics of human connection and how do we show people how to add humans in real life to their inner circle. This is more than likes, links, shares, and follows. Thank you.
Thank you, Thom. Appreciate that.